Navigating an SAP transformation? We get it. By day, we work hands-on with people like you across the globe. By night, we share what actually works. Welcome to Transformation Every Day with Alexander Greb and Johannes Langguth, where your complex transformation becomes clear, actionable, and achievable.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Alexander Greb. I'm Consulting Director at CBS Corporate Business Solutions. And today, Johannes Langguth and me are thrilled to be joined by one of the key architects behind SAP's Cloud ERP vision, Bert Schulze. We dive into the evolution of product success at SAP, the strategic role of RISE with SAP, Cloud ERP, and the Clean Core approach, why transformation is a mindset, not just a project, how agentic AI compares to classic SAS thinking, what distinguishes customers who transform successfully, and a sneak peek at what to expect from SAP over the next 2 years. Get ready for a candid, insightful conversation that goes beyond buzzwords and into the heart of SAP's transformation strategy. Only here on Transformation Every Day. Grow has now become more of a journey now than as a product as it used to be in the communication.
Well, of course, we need to all get used a bit to the terms and to the positioning of either a product, an SKU, which you can sell, or a journey. But at the end of the day, the product is the product. There is typically always a logical product underneath. You need people who have an understanding of how all of these product elements are working properly together. And also what we consider as an SAP Business Suite is something which is, of course, augmenting what we had as Cloud ERP before. But overall, in the last 8 years, since we also run Cloud ERP in a public environment, there is not a single customer who just went live with what customers sometimes think is the ABAP core, right? It has always been BTP components, which we anyway develop as part of our standard. It's SuccessFactors capabilities, it's Ariba, Concur capabilities. And all of that is anyway running smoothly together. So the SAP Business Suite is more the next logical evolution, but not really creating me more gray hairs overnight than what I have anyway already.
Great. And what is also live is this podcast because we are recording now, which means welcome, Bert, to Transformation Every Day. It's great to have you. Let me introduce you in a way which is probably a little bit unusual because I think it's remarkable that you are probably in the SAP world, which is rich with long titles. You're having one of the longest. It is Head of Cloud ERP Product Success, Co-Innovation and Engineering Adoption Programs. Can you guide me through that title?
Sure. So first, and I think this is most important for me, but also for my team, we're an engineering-led organization. This is for me most important, which means also we're somewhere in between the engineering teams who are really crafting the software and the services and the teams who are really running at large scale, like our services organization, and we are always in between. So I pretty much also invented that term of product success and also the way how we drive it already a couple of years back. Because when we went into the first idea of S/4HANA after ECC, we all had the feeling that we're changing so many moving parts at once that we need to have a team which is completely unbiased of sales, marketing, but also services or customers' point of view from individual perspective and be used for roll in and roll out of the latest and greatest, because we wanted to make sure that every project across the globe can participate from the experience others already made. So we used the team for rollout, and we also used it for rollback to make sure wherever the product is not perceived in a way how we at SAP would love it to be, we can change things. And this is, in my eyes, also one of the biggest differentiators between what my team is doing, because we can't scale to 6 or 10 or 15 or 20,000 customers. But we can ensure that we can change the product. We work with product management. We also have access to the product backlog and work jointly with our colleagues in product management and engineering to ensure that we shape the product in a positive way as the so-called voice of customers and voice of partners.
I mean, also welcome from my side, Bert. Great to have you. You said it's a very engineering centric activities, and at the same time, you said you kind of connect to customers. How do you connect customers? How do you do that? How do you select the right customers to get them successful?
Oh, that's a great question, Johannes. Honestly, I don't know how much time you have, but let's maybe go a bit back, because typically when we go with a new product to market, like S/4HANA originally a couple of years back with the 15.11 release, so the release in November in 2015, we almost guided every single customer. We took them by the hand and really made sure that we as an engineering and product management unit are close enough to the product to know how and where to guide the customer, give advice in the right direction. And at that point in time, we touched, I would say, every single customer. And I still also have the story of every single customer on the back of my head. Even if you start Googling today, I'm pretty sure you will find Swiss Property, which was the very first customer ever who went live on S/4HANA. And in the beginning, you touch every customer, then maybe only 90%, 80%, 70%, and so on. And today, if you see the massive amount of customers which we have in S/4HANA, we're only touching a very selective set of customers. So what we typically do, once the standard is settled, we go for the first one in the dedicated industry, the first one who is going beyond 20 terabytes, the first one who is going into a certain geography or with a certain combination of products, because we always want to be there where it hurts, where we can learn most, and where we can shape the product in the best way, because early adoption also means more feedback than if you have a mature product and a late adoption. And on the other side, I got from all my leaders in the past, when I got like an euro to spend, my clear definition was always I spent 50 cents of that euro in, as said before, going where it hurts, really helping customers, solving problems, getting and gaining hands-on experience. And the other 50 cents I always spend in scaling that knowledge, going back, writing blogs, writing KBAs, improving the way how the product is perceived, even helping with the documentation in some areas, and make sure that, whatever we experience at an early stage is not going to experience in the same way, but in a better way for the next customers to come and adopt. And this have always been my paradigm. And this is also how we really touch customers, how we select.
If you say you go there where it hurts, you must have some great war stories. Maybe without mentioning the customer name, huh?
Definitely. I mean, we definitely have a lot of stories. And as said, when I embarked on that journey of S4, I have to say I still had brown hair. I mean, now, of course, you can't see that because we're in a podcast, but my hair is almost gray these days. And of course, this comes a bit also from all of the energy which we have put into the product and into these customer engagements. But I can call, if you ask for that, I think one of the stories I can definitely recall was in 2016 when we have brought the first brownfield conversion scenario for Hasso Plattner's keynote at Sapphire. And this have been the very early ideas of how a brownfield could look like. I mean, at the end of the day, of course, there was like tons of work which he did in the back to really make that happen. But Hasso came with a very clear vision. He said he wants to have a brownfield conversion on center stage live. And when he starts with his speech, he wanted the customer to start with that brownfield conversion. And at the end of the day, when he's done, he wants to move back to the project, and then we should just declare that we're there. Now, honestly, today, it works that way, right? If you do today, like the pure technical conversion of a customer, I mean, we can do that in really like 1, 2, sometimes, of course, more hours, but like in a very short time frame. At that point in time, of course, this was visionary, and we had a lot of in-between fast-forward steps just to make sure that we can show it at the end of the day. But of course, I mean, these are things where we have been involved, and since then, the world has changed, and we have tons of these stories, of course, from the earlier days. There are less and less these days because the product is much more mature, but definitely still good fun and a lot of things to observe and learn.
And what also has changed probably in the last 10 years is that if you would again announce a keynote by saying we make a live brownfield conversion on stage, you probably would empty that hall within minutes. Yeah. But considering that change, when you look back, what kind of beliefs did you have 10 years ago that you now, based on the learnings you had, where you say now they do not really stand the test of time anymore?
You mean from a product perspective, or in general from transformation?
Product and transformation.
I think that's a really good question, Alex. I think I recall that even in 2015, when we embarked on that journey, we also did a couple of these open SAP courses on digital transformation. I think we also talked about that, I think, a couple of years back already, right? And interesting enough, at that point in time, many customers told us that they're not buying into this digital transformation because they still produce physical products. This is not going to happen and hit them that way. These days, we all know we're far behind that. A lot of things have changed. But what I do still see from a perspective and also driving a couple of things where we defined also that term of doing things right and doing the right thing. And this is something which still is for me my everyday paradigm if I go into this kind of conversations, because it's one thing to really optimize things to death and really make sure that things are really running the best possible way, so doing things right, versus how do I really go and change things in a positive way to really do the right thing. And this is also really interesting if we transport that into S4HANA, because we have seen, and I've also observed in the last couple of years, by far too many customers who are running S4HANA project as technical projects and just moving that over. And this is what I would have never expected when we embarked on that journey, because we've put so much energy into really changing the complete code line, the simplification approach, making sure that customers can really change their business processes and rethink them in a certain way. And we've seen that a lot of customers made really good use of it, but also a certain set of customers made no use of it at all. And this is something which I would have never expected.
From your perspective, Pat, what's the reasoning why so many customers kind of disregard the transformational potential that such a project can bring?
Well, I think there are a couple of things. Number one is, and you can also see that these days as pretty much, I would say, something which is an established point of view, but transformation is not a one-time effort. It's not a project where you just go and set up a program and do kind of transformation for the company, and then you are transformed, and then you just go back to your normal business. I think it is pretty much if you're not happy with your body, for example, you need to change the way how you live. You need to really change fundamentally your beliefs, and you also need to make sure that you bring that into a certain direction. So it's a new lifestyle, right? It's a new agile lifestyle which you need to live if you want to really get there. And a lot of customers still run any kind of transformation as kind of a time-boxed program. I set somebody on it, I transform, and afterwards I am transformed, and then I can just go back into my comfort zone. And this is something which I think a lot of companies underestimate how much effort that is also which goes into that to really come to that new lifestyle and run it in a way that you train this muscle on a very frequent basis. So thinking outside the box is really not a walk in the park. And this is what you fundamentally need to do, right? I mean, you really not need to think how you conceptualize things in a complete different way than you have looked at it in the past. And I can recall, it's really a couple of years back, but I wrote an article or a blog, not to emphasize on that one. And I made one very provocative statement. I said, if you really want to change, you need to get a hacker on your team or ask a child for advice. And this was also the headline of that blog, right? Because at the end of the day, both are really thinking with ignorance of convention and boundaries, which are really mind-blowing. A hacker look at the thing in a really amazing way. They explore it and say, hey, what else can I do with it? And how can I break it? And this is something which you sometimes need to really think out of that box and consider, I run my process, my business now for many years. How can I really get my business going and rethink it in a different way. And sometimes, of course, it's a bit more down to earth, and then you just go into design thinking methodologies or other elements, how you really bring that to the next level, which is of course also a proper way to do it. So you don't necessarily need to have a hacker in your team. But this is something where I personally think this makes sense. And a lot of people don't understand what's currently happening with the digitalization, right? I mean, this is also scary. This is scary for the establishment. This is scary for people thinking, oh, what is then my role going forward tomorrow? We see that also with AI, for example. A lot of people are saying, well, I hear what AI can do, but what is my role? How can I really rather leverage the technology than that it's potentially substituting me going forward? And build on that fear, built on that missing knowledge. Sometimes I would say this is the biggest challenge for customers in between like a good transformative project and just doing a technical upgrade.
When we look at what you said and we look back, and I remember the time very well, in 2015, 2016 and so on, the big story of course was speed. HANA and S/4HANA makes you faster. Yeah, that was a big storyline that we all run. And this is always, of course, emphasizing the status quo, the efficiency part by basically continuing to do the same thing, but faster. But you were referring now that it has become, of course, more important now to go on the efficiency track, on the effectiveness track. Yeah, that you are now have to be able to do different things because the challenges are different, and the world around us and all the industries are highly disruptive at the moment. When we look now at the definition of product success, which is your job in that way, is product success now also defined differently for you when you now say product success is now not only adoption, but is adoption in the right way?
Yes and no. I mean, first I would say it all starts with customer empathy. You need to really understand how a customer is using your product and how they potentially are going to use that in the future. And I often see that there is a misunderstanding between customer success and product success. Just to be precise also on that definition. Customer success, I mean, in my eyes simply, or in my words simply explained, customer success has the individual customer success in focus. So you go towards a customer and you try to solve that customer challenge, make them successful. And in product success, we also drive customer challenge resolution. But we always have a focus on pattern analyze. So I need to understand, my team needs to understand, it is really trained on instantly checking if the adoption hurdle is rooted in the individual customer situation or if it's rooted in a product issue or in a product documentation issue or in any kind of thing which is related to the product, right? Because I also look at that really holistically. And if there's a pattern which we can see, if there is a pattern which applies, then of course we go and change that. We make a case, we clearly say, look, this is going to hit most likely 10, 50, 100 or 500 customers. And this is why it's also worth to change things in the product or in the documentation. Beside that, what has really been changed between on-premise and cloud is, in my eyes, also the adoption cycle of concentric circles. In on-premise, also if I just recall 1511, you saw the first customers adopting, then you see the next 5, the next 10, and which gives you always a bit of time to react. In public cloud, if you ship something, it is instantly at RTC, also at release to customer, it is instantly in all our customer systems, which means the mindset about day one impacts potentially, and the way how you test, how you also pre-test, how you build up customer-like testing environments as one example is super important. And the other aspect in my eyes is in SaaS, you need to look at it more holistically. In on-premise, you typically have, to be fair, 3 years, 4 years between the customer buying decision and when the customer is live. In between, there's the selection for the right implementer, there is the setup in the project, then you have relatively long durations for the project, and then maybe 4 years later you're live. Who remembers what have been discussed in all of the details 4 years ago? And the end user is then the last team which is then seeing the product. In SaaS, you build much more for the end user. You build much more functionality capabilities and also for a much more condensed timeline, which means typically between the buying decision for a customer and when you have the UAT, so the user acceptance test handover, you sometimes have 3 months, 4 months. And this makes it completely different from the overall equation on what you have to look at from a product success perspective, because for me, sometimes the bad documentation could be an equally large problem than if you have like a bug in the coding. And both needs to be fixed instantly. And it needs to be self-explaining. And we also see, by the way, in public cloud, many more partners who are doing their first implementation ever. In the on-premise world, you had like a super established, long-lasting implementation force who were trained over many, many years. In public cloud, a lot of startups, a lot of partners are doing their first implementation, which means also for them, we need to move away from SAP language. We need to move away from a technical language. We need to also make sure that we simplify the way how a partner who is doing the first implementation can consume our content and the solution and provision the system in a much simpler way. Because I can't expect that the person is looking into 10, 15, 20 different sources of information to do the needful. It needs to be much simpler. And from my team's perspective, from a product success perspective, these are also patterns we look at. And this is what we typically also feed back these days more into the product organization than the classical coding challenges.
Bert, speaking about SaaS systems, and you mentioned that the implementation time is much shorter, so that eventually will also lead to a higher ROI. But from a business value perspective, in your mind, your thoughts, what are the real business values beyond faster implementation or I don't know, maybe smaller costs of such a SaaS ERP or any SaaS product? Maybe not just focusing out on the ERP aspect.
Yeah, I mean, this is something which goes in my eyes also in a pretty nice setting with Clean Core, because what we currently do, and maybe let me quickly allude why I talk about that. Because in Clean Core, we also try to bring customer systems as close to SaaS as possible. And both, and also SaaS as such, create like the same or similar value to our customers. The customer themselves, they can focus much more on their business and what they can do best, and leave things which are typically not their butter and bread business to somebody else, to somebody who's taking responsibility for that. And of course, once you are doing 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 systems in the same way, we typically deal with that in a different way from our operations than typically an individual customer can do. And this also goes along with, for example, the experience to run upgrade activities and other things. If you have a very, very experienced customer, let's say, then they've done in the last 10 years how many upgrades? I mean, in the best case, 10. In a typical case, I would say between 3, 4, maybe 5. Maybe
if they're good.
3, maybe more 3 than 5. If I look into the same time frame, if I am a public cloud and SaaS ERP customer, I've done 33 upgrades in the same time frame, which means the convenience to get used to that, the way of getting new, latest and greatest functionality and feature technologies at hand is a complete different setting than if you do that in a classical on-premise environment. And here, in my eyes, the value lies of a SaaS solution, right? Because you are running, per definition, always on the latest and greatest. There is no old source code per definition in that environment. And if I recall my customers, or I also recall even IT people, right? A business owner typically runs today through the company like a kid in a candy store and pick what appeals, right? They want to have AI, they want to have agility, they're hungry to really get to the next topic. Again,
And they want to have it free of charge. Sorry, just saying.
They want to have it free of charge, which is fair, but they want to at least not even think about how do I get now my hand into that glass. They want to really get access to it, right? And this is what we try to do with public cloud, because the business is changing so fast for them, for their competitors, and we all see if somebody else has a race car and you come with your family car, and then you go on the Nürburgring, you have to consider who is fastest through the finishing line. And this is at the end of the day the question everybody needs to answer for themselves. How volatile is my business? How well oiled and well running are my business processes? How much of what I have done in the past still applies for me in the future in that overall setting? And this is where, of course, SaaS creates an unfair advantage for those companies who consider, hey, I can do that for standard processes as much as possible based on standard. And of course, only differentiate with significantly less. That's at the end of the day where I see the market is moving.
Just zooming in again on this standardized way, right? I mean, SaaS products by nature are targeted more towards a standard way of doing things with, of course, the possibility to extend. Do you feel that being so standard increases the pressure to deliver innovation? Because by nature, standard processes are replaceable, aren't they? So you differentiate only by the innovation piece. Do you feel increased pressure to deliver innovations?
I mean, there are two sides of it, right? The one, if you ask me at SAP as a solution provider, if I feel the pressure to increase, and then also the customer themselves if they use SaaS. And for the second one, I mean, which company in this world is going to their customers and saying, hey, please buy my product because I have the greatest HR processes in the world? Name me one. Maybe there is one, but I'm not aware of one. So this is why we've also seen that really highly non-differentiating processes like HR, success factors, if I call that into SAP terms, but typically LOB solutions, procurement, Concur, they are ubiquity. And they moved into the public cloud first. And we currently see also in core finance, for example, and maybe Johannes correct me, but which company in the world is selling their products because they tell their customers, hey, I'm so highly differentiating in my billing processes or in my financial processes, this is why you should buy my product. I think differentiation happens in where the companies have their core assets and where they also run their core processes. And this is why we also see in public cloud, the highest adoption these days is, of course, starting from finance and spend. Because here, again, it doesn't even matter if you are Apple or if you are BMW or if you are like a small company next floor, next door. At the end of the day, they all run core accounts receivable, accounts payable, Dunning runs in a very similar way, just at different scale.
Alex, I don't know what you think about it, but the way I sometimes have discussion with customers, if you speak to top level, it's like, yeah, we're so standard. We want to be standard. I like standard. Yes, we go. And then I think that's quite interesting that in the end, when you then touch base with the people that actually manage the system, suddenly standardized processes, at least from top management level, become differentiating processes on working level. It's a very interesting aspect. I don't know what you think about that, Alex, but I've had a couple of conversations lately where I thought, okay, there's quite a mismatch here.
I fully agree, but we have to be honest. Who would ever consider him or herself like, oh, I'm just working within commodity processes? Yeah, nobody would do that.
Everything is differentiating.
Everybody is differentiating, of course. But I fully agree. Companies are like humans. Yeah, all three of us, we look quite different. Okay, we make gray up, all of us, and so on, and this again unites us. But in a certain way, we all are, of course, unique. But still, genetically, we are 99.999% identical. And enterprises and organizations, in my opinion, are not so different. They are, in fact, 90x-ish identical. And those are the commodity processes. If you really go and do your homework and go into the processes of a company, we as Signavio, for example, and really check what is really differentiating for you and what is commodity, you really find out that the differentiating part is actually not very big. Which means, of course, that a clean core and that standardization, and as such, of course, the way to actually do and live SaaS is much easier than many people probably would like to think about and to confess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the innovation lies in the products. Think of, I mean, you either have an operational excellence. For example, you can produce at the lowest price compared to all of your competitors, and then still the core ERP processes are then optimized for mass production, or you have a highly customized product, and then your core ERP processes are optimized for high customized processes. But at the end of the day, regardless which product you sell, and they could be in complete different industries, it is then the same core ERP process, which is either optimized for mass production or optimized for mass customization. And this makes sometimes a difference. But also, and I think Johannes also here, there's an interesting loop back to the question which you asked initially on these stories which we had also from the beginning of S4HANA. And I can make one very quick story. We did a co-innovation with a customer which is from Waldorf, just 40, 50 kilometers through the air. And they had a serious challenge with their ECC environment because they have like super large BOMs, bill of materials, and a very, very complex product setting. So for them, it took 27 hours to do an MRP run. 27 hours to do an MRP run. So how does that translate into the practical reality of a material planner? The last thing this person did Friday before he left the company, he pressed the MRP run button. And then the system was noodling the entire weekend. And on Monday morning, the first thing the person did, print out the MMO4, the result of the MRP run, and then they worked the entire week on the hard copy from Monday with the data from Friday. You can't really call that real time, right?
And hopefully the job that didn't fail over the weekend, just saying.
That didn't fail over the weekend. So what happened? We optimized the MRP, as you might recall, in 15.11 was the first version of the MRP run, optimized it with HANA. By the way, in the meantime, we've also then applied ML, made it like a predictive analytic. Also now these days with further AI adoption, capabilities. And interesting enough, we optimized already in 2016, 2017, we optimized for this customer the MRP run to 24 minutes. Think of that, from 27 hours to 27 minutes. Now, why do I tell you the story? We went then back super proud with that result to the material planner and told him, hey, what you do in 27 hours, we can now do in 24 minutes. Guess what the answer was? The answer was that he said, well, I don't mind. I press Friday that button, and I don't care if it's done at 5:30 or if it's done Sunday late. And this is exactly the challenge also to what you asked before, right? Why customers are then sometimes so reluctant. You can't decide on these business process optimization. You can't decide that on some certain levels what you do with that. I mean, of course, I mean, if you think logically, what typically happens is that you do an sales operations planning based on the results of an MRP. If you can only do that once a week because of the long runtime, you can only do your operations planning like Tuesdays. Nowadays, if you do that in 24 minutes, and by the way, not even harming the transactional system anymore, because this runs complete seamless, you can do that if you want 8 or 10 or 12 times a day. And this also gives you the opportunity to completely rethink the business processes and react much faster, for example, to changes from the supply chain and stuff like that. But you need to have the next or even the second next level to really make use and understand what is the advantage you gain here really from the technology which you apply.
And this is a point where I have to jump in, because what the product is offering and what in the end is actually used are unfortunately two completely different things. And who's really in question here is basically us, the consulting world. Yeah, because so many customers, so many projects that I have met, did not really get the necessity, or did not really see the necessity to adapt their processes. And who's at fault in that way? Also, of course, those from my profession who do not really know the difference when you talk about commodity on the one side, differentiating process on the other side, that you have to optimize them completely in the different way. In commodity processes, you have to go into efficiency. Yeah, you want to be quick. Yeah, you want to run it without any exceptions and so on. There's where speed is really, really the way to go. In differentiating processes, it's of course completely different. There you want to be enabled now. It's all about top line. You want to be able to do things you were not able to do before and change your processes. And that's why your example is wonderful. Yeah, because in that case, the mindset also of the customers was, okay, we continue like doing our stuff. So 24 minutes, it's impressive, does not really change anything for me. Yeah, and this is really where we have to point at ourselves in the consulting business, that we have to see ourselves not as the typical migration people anymore, but really as consultants who guide the customer by knowing what kind of capabilities are within the new systems to new ways of working. Yeah, and that has to be part of any project that's done.
Alex, do you include organizational change in all of your offerings these days?
Absolutely, especially in cloud projects. When you go into public cloud, this is a change project, 100%. Yeah, if you do not include that, you will be far away from actually living close to the standard and being able to do the benefits. I've seen still projects like RFPs or RFQs and so on, where customers do not really want to have change in it, because they say like, that's expensive and we want to cut that out. But there is a 100% correlation between between project success in that way and the inclusion of change management. 100%.
Absolutely, also underlines our experience that this needs to go hand in hand. Else, it's not successful, or at least not leveraging the extent which the product can give you.
How weird is that we are now almost 40 minutes in this podcast and we have not even once used the word AI? But it had to come. It had to come.
I think Bert used it one time.
Really? Did it?
Yeah. I think he said something when he spoke about the MRP plan. I think you said it.
Yeah, you're right.
Shame on me, I did.
But the question had to come. What really changes for you by AI? Is AI, in your respect, just a new capability, or is it really that you say, man, we basically have to rethink everything that we do?
Yeah, for me, it's very simple. I mean, I absolutely hate AI because AI now forces me to relearn ERP again. I thought when I joined the S4 space in 2014, I had to completely relearn ERP. I was an ERP guy before, and I thought I know how you run a process. And then we've seen that everything moved already at that point in time towards the preparation of zero touch, towards change processes. We just made the example with the MRP run. And now I'm standing again in front of ERP and have to relearn ERP completely again. So therefore, of course, I mean, not really hating it, but this is something which really is interesting. And if I recall discussing with engineers, for example, who have put like all their heart blood into a great UI, and then we come and say, hey, do you know, if I now apply AI, the best screen you can have is the screen you don't need. And if I use the navigational capabilities of AI, for example, then I can just skip that screen. And this is something which is an interesting discussion. This is not wanted or liked by everybody, but I think here where it really kicks in to a certain extent. And this is where I also feel that we are right at the tipping of the iceberg if it comes to AI adoption, because we still currently optimize AI or use AI mainly to optimize within each functional area within each silo. But what I do see is that it becomes even more important to optimize for the fully automated hands-off zero-touch process from A to Z. And I think, Alex, I don't know if I used that example, but I think we had last year a meeting, right? And for me, it's a bit like if you're in a subway or in a tube. And let's consider you're in Hamburg, and you know on Saturday at 3 p.m. there's a game from St. Pauli. So you need to get 20,000 people from the Hamburg main station to the Millantor for that game. You don't go and have all of the stops which you typically have for a train station. You just have special trains who are running from a main station to Millantor in one shot, right? To get these people as fast as possible in, and later at the end of the game as fast as possible out. And we need to think much more AI also in that direction. How can I take a standardized business process, which might have today 10, 12, 13, 14 stops, and don't make the exception the standard and say, yes, there might be 5% of the business processes who needs to stop at all of the 12 or 13 stops. Think of the standard way forward mass process as the design process, which should run zero touch through the organization, and then just think of exception processes if certain elements, business objects, or certain boundary conditions are not fitting, and then you go through that exception process. And this is a different way of also thinking ERP, because also at SAP, and by the way, this is most likely not an SAP problem, but a general problem. We always thought SAP to make sure that you have this golden template where you can always run also the highest exception process. And then you design your entire process for that one time a year exception process, that you can also cover that. And this is now significantly changing with AI, particularly with agentic AI, that you can really make sure design it for the mass process and take just the normal route for those which are not fitting. This is the one aspect where I do see that AI really has the potential to completely change the way how we interact with such a system. And the other way, of course, is where we're currently putting a lot of effort into Joule. And I'm just off the early adopter for public and also for private, which I led with my team, right? So we also see here the very first feedback from customers before we've set it for general availability. And we optimize also the implementation scenarios and so on. But what you do see here is also that particularly these navigational capabilities to not have your home screen and then putting all of that on your home screen. This now becomes similar to what I hope that I can say at least I do so. In the first years of my iPhone, I always have put like groups and screens and optimize it. These days, I just go in, search, hey, go to this or that, right? And you don't use your structure anymore. And this is pretty much what you can also see how customers are using Joule. Please create a sales order. Don't put like sales order as a favorite on your home screen. So this is really changing the way how customers are interact with the system. And this is in my eyes something which is really at the tipping of the iceberg at this stage.
So in a certain way, Joule will be the successor of Fiori.
That's what you said.
No, I'm challenging that because shouldn't it be that you in maybe a certain amount of time, be it months, be it years, do not need a UI really anymore because all the thing you do is just talk to Joule?
I think the relevance of UIs of different steps is going to diminish. I personally think that over time, as said, you will not have like these 5 steps in between, but particularly if you have contextual information, sometimes also it makes perfect sense to see how far we can drive Joule or in general AI to make that also feasible for customers to adopt. And I think you also still need the UI for the exception processes and for certain elements which are running outside, but the relevance per se is slightly going down. Yes.
I think in 2024, Satya Nadella said this famous, I'm not even sure whether he really said it, but he said literally something like SaaS with AI, SaaS is dead. And I think Alex touched on it with asking, does that mean we only talk to the system going forward? What's your perspective, Bert, on the statement SaaS is dead?
Yeah. At first he said that. This video is still online. I mean, I watched it definitely. I mean, this is quite interesting. And he said that particularly for agentic AI, right? That if you have an agent and then you program a set of agents and then you put maybe one super agent on top, that this is the death or the end of SaaS. I mean, you can have tons of different views on that one. I personally think if I look at the core business we're doing with finance and all of that, I mean, you still need your audit trails. You still need to make sure that you have a very robust and structured way of how you audit processes, how you make sure you are compliant and integer as a company. But of course, for dedicated peripheries, I personally think this has like a huge potential. And honestly, if you play around with it yourself, doing like nice agentic AI for your own Outlook optimization and sending emails and all of that. I mean, this is super easy to consume, right? But you need to control it. And on a corporate level, you still need to have that entire integrity of business processes because you can't sell more than what you have on stock. These kind of things, right? And all of that somehow needs to have like a certain base. So maybe from a stable perspective, it might be like 2 decades out. But yes, I mean, it has a certain reality for a lot of periphery.
If I would give you a billboard, you can write something on it. A huge billboard in a central city, be it Hamburg, Munich, Berlin, and so on. What would you write on that?
What would I write on it? Don't find the fault, find the remedy. I think this is stolen from Henry Ford, if I'm not mistaken, but I think this is something which typically resonates with me in that overall setting. That's pretty much how I look, and how I have a couple of firm beliefs, and when I also drive teams and products.
When you look into the next 1 or 2 years, let's do some glass ball looking. What do you think will be the big topics? Will we still talk about AI, or do you think other topics like maybe sustainability and so on, which went a little bit into the quiet mode, in my opinion, in the last months, will come back? Where will be the discussions?
No, it's a great question. I think, yes, we will continue to talk about AI because the technologies are maturing. It's also maturing within the product. So we see like by far more embedded AI cases who are really creating value. I can only see that in many dimensions. We're also moving away from pure showcases to use cases, because this is what is most important, right? I, as a product success organization, I mean, we look at adoption. I'm not that much, of course, we're interested in what we're selling because this also pays all our salaries. But at the end of the day, we're looking at adoption. So what cases are really going to be adopted? And this is, I think, also something where there's still a huge gap in the industry between what the technology can already do today and what is really adopted in a daily use case. This is one aspect which I personally think is also going to keep us engaged in the next 2 years, as you asked for the 2 years out. BDC becomes, from an SAP perspective, a very important part, because this is now solving a challenge for customers, particularly in a federated environment with a unified semantical layer, which also gives the context of core ERP capabilities into that approach, which is a great foundation for the next level of AI, to really make sure that you can also make sure all of that contextual information which you run as a corporate organization are in one dedicated data source, and can also make that much more agile and much more tangible to really look into that one. So I think these are the things which are definitely keeping us busy in the next 2 years, from an adoption, but also, of course, from further shaping the services for the market. SaaS is the next one. I mean, you will also hear at Sapphire a lot about that. I think over the last years, we've seen a significant uptake in S4HANA public cloud or public ERP, SaaS ERP adoption. And at Sapphire, this will get another large push, right, from an migration perspective, also for installed base customers to look into that one. So all of that is, in my eyes, going in the direction of keeping us busy in the next 2 to 3 years.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting now with which kind of customers we now talk about SaaS. You remember just a few years back, it was just the non-producing companies, service companies, startups, and so on. But now really, really heavy metal stuff is going into the public cloud. I'm talking at the moment with a automotive supplier who wants to go 100% into public cloud. Huge, interesting topic, because they say, like, if we want to survive, and we have to shift also our business, because automotive is, for some folks, it has to become a little bit of a rough terrain. They say public cloud is there to save us here. And
no, definitely
quite interesting. Yeah.
No, absolutely agree. And I mean, we have grown that also over the last years, manufacturing dedicated capabilities in the different industries. I also think that we are now, we learned that we're not having like 25 industries at once adopting public cloud, where we see now that the circles are growing, where we also see industries and specifics also adopting. Absolutely.
Johannes, what's your last word on that?
Famous last word. Yeah, I see that the emergence of public cloud in my customer interactions as well. But what I see as well is that a lot of big customers take, I would call it, intermediate steps. There is the push towards becoming SaaS ready. So I see two-tier scenarios for certain divisions, certain subsidiaries. So I think SaaS is on the agenda everywhere, but a lot of companies are not as daring as your automotive customer. They take intermediary steps to learn, because I think we touched base on that earlier. SaaS is also change. And if I look, I don't know, a 40,000, 100,000 employee company, you can't push down change top down like for those 100 or 120 or 130,000 employees. Like, it needs to go incremental, an incremental evolution. So I believe intermediary steps is something that a lot of companies think about now.
Which is very interesting what you say, Johannes, because I had recently a conversation, and Bert, I would like to hear your spin on that, about that maybe within the next years we will have something like a 3-level customer base, where you really have on top the high achievers who are probably on public cloud, who are highly agile, who are consuming the latest innovation, who are using AI and so on. Then you have the more mid-level area, which probably are running private cloud implementations, who are like knocking on the top, but are a little bit more conservative in their area. And then we have the kind of, let's say, a little bit more conservative bottom line, who have the problems to get rid of their legacy processes and who have challenges really moving forward. And as such, of course, we probably have to address these kinds of three levels differently, with more supportive to the more lower levels, with more challenging to the top levels. How do you see that?
I think to a certain extent, I understand where you're coming from, but I also, this is a very, I think, also provocative way of looking at it, right? Because we've seen also customers moving with a greenfield approach into a new on-premise installation or into a private cloud installation. Sometimes there are different reasons why you choose the one way or the other. I would not per se say, even if there's a tendency, of course, that public cloud customers are always the better, the more innovative ones. You need to make sure that at the end of the day, you find a solution which fits your business. And this is why, by the way, also, and I said that also somewhere in between. This is why we also invented Clean Core, right? Because we've seen that we need to give at least guidance to our customers if they run and decide for either an on-premise or private cloud solution, that we help them how to guide them to as close to SaaS as possible to make sure that they are also even able to adopt and run agile going forward. And then you can also have like a good innovative company running either in a private cloud environment on premises. Indeed difficult for us these days because you see with all of the access structures, with the way of providing new capabilities like Joule, this is technically not possible in an on-premise environment, right? You need to have like central layers where you access and allow the technical services to dig into your solutions, and this makes it really super complicated. But beside that, I think you can be equally innovative also in private than you can do in public.
Absolutely. Bert, where is possible to meet you in the next months? Sapphire?
Sapphire Madrid. Next week, DCOM in Chicago. Then definitely visiting my team in India anytime soon in June. So yeah, a lot of occasions. Also have a couple of public speeches. I think Schugen again. Yeah, so wherever you like, definitely welcome. But also drop me an email. Or, of course, interesting enough, as you see, I mean, LinkedIn works pretty well to connect really the world, to connect also thoughts. So I think this is always also a good way to see what's top of mind for us and how we also spread some of the latest and greatest news. And by the way, we're now off the product expert training. We had another nearly 30,000 registrations with partners and SAP people on seeing what kind of content we're also, producing on a frequent basis. And we're almost preparing for the next early release series to come, right, with the next upgrade. So also here, be my guest to listen in.
Perfect.
Cool.
Bert, thank you very much for being our guest. It was a fantastic conversation, like always. And looking forward to see you at one of these occasions.
Wonderful host. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.